Hello everybody, I'm Sky Carter of Sky Carter Colour, and this is a demonstration video for a weaving technique called Soumak. So let's begin, shall we? So I've got a little sampler here of I was just mucking around and playing with some stuff, but this is a great little example of Soumak using quite a chunky sort of roving, and also this is quite a chunky yarn here. This is a synthetic roving, and this is 100% merino roving. So it gives you this nice sort of twisting pattern or plaited pattern, and it's a really nice texture option for your weavings. I'm going to show you using a couple of products. The first one, this is just quite a thick fluffy synthetic yarn, and I've measured out a double arm span and folded it in half. So I've actually got one little loopy end. Now you can do it as thick or thin as you like. You can just do it in a single thickness or a quadruple thickness, it doesn't really matter, but depending on how much you've dispensed and the kind of material that you're using, there'll be two ways that you start this off. So I'm just working on my medium-sized bamboo loom. If you're watching because you've purchased one of my weaving kits, you will have been working on my small loom, but everything is the same regardless of the size loom that you use. When I say the same, I mean the technique is the same. Okay, so if you're using a single thickness of yarn, to attach it to your warp threads, just wrap twice around either side. It doesn't really matter. You can begin from left or right. It's whatever feels intuitively comfortable for you. And that you can see that just sort of anchors it on nicely. And once we've done a row, we can kind of come back and tuck that in out of the way. However, because I do have this folded in half, I can take advantage of this section here and actually secure it onto my warp thread like so. So they're the two options of how you can secure the material onto your yarn before you start the technique. So obviously I'm holding this up in front of me and demonstrating backwards essentially. You'll be holding your loom like so. You'll have attached your thread and you'll have it all heading in the direction that you're going to be moving in. So for example, if you have attached it to the right hand side, then you want the length of your yarn to all be heading in that direction, and if you attach it to the left hand side, you want it going the other way, etc., etc. The other thing that we need to take note of is we want to be putting all of that yarn into our lap and holding on to the end here. So I'm just going to trim that because it's a bit uneven and it might cause confusion if I let it stay that way. So I found this was the best way to wrap my head around this weaving technique when I first began, as long as I always remembered to drag the excess yarn back into my lap every time I did a stitch, and then always work with the end of the yarn. I seem to always be able to reorient myself. So I'm just going to turn the loom around to resume the demonstration. Move that out of the way. Okay, so this is all sitting in your lap and you're holding on to this piece. So we've attached to our first warp thread. Now we're going to the next warp thread over, and we're going in a backwards direction, almost like a back stitch, and looping around like so. The important thing to remember here is to not pull really tight, because if we pull tight, we're going to kind of pull those warp threads together, and we're actually going to lose the benefit of getting that nice little angled shape. Let's just go with that word, shall we? Okay, so that's our first one. Once again, pull everything back into your lap, grab the end, go to the next warp thread across, back under it, pulling through, but not pulling through tightly. We want to maintain that shape. Back in your lap, holding on to the end, next warp thread over, and so on and so forth. Now sometimes people kind of get into the rhythm and they're like, oh yeah, it's all working nicely. And then they get halfway across and they're like, oh, their brain kind of forgets. So if you always just remember that pull it all into your lap, hold on to the beginning or the end of your yarn. That really does help reorient you. So I'll just do a few more of these just so we start to get a nice bank of that pattern. And you can see as I've been moving along, I'm just kind of pulling these out. This one's I've pulled a bit too hard, so I'm just kind of evening them up so we've got that nice little angular thing happening. And I'll do a few more and then we'll go back in the other direction, which might be even more of a brain teaser for you. Some people pick this up really quickly. Some people are like, ah, and I was an person to begin with. I was like, oh my God, it just doesn't, it's like, what the, all right, so I think that's enough of an example of what we can get on the first row with a twist. And you could hypothetically just repeat that several times and you just sort of have these nice twists on top of each other. However, if you want to create a plait, once you've finished your last stitch, then, and it can be at any point, you can go all the way across or just stop part way, it's entirely up to you. The important thing to remember here is to then wrap around this warp thread twice. So it feels excessive, but it will help get everything back in the direction that we need. So that's 1 and that's 2. And then you can see all of the yarn then naturally sits in the direction that we're now going to head. And that action has also just kind of created that first little reverse angle that sits against the bottom row. Okay, so just to reiterate what we were going on about before, pull all of that back into your lap, working with the end, and it's exactly the same technique. However, we're just going backwards, or we're doing it in the reverse direction. So I'm just going to the next warp thread across. So this is where we finished, and this is the next warp thread, and I'm just scooping under that. And I'm not pulling too tight, or I did pull too tight, so I'm just kind of pulling it out again, the little tuft out again. Next one across. Flipping it all down into my lap. Your lap, I should say, not really my lap. The lap, a lap. And we can now start to see we've got that little reverse angle happening. So we've got the fishtail or the plait effect, whatever you want to call it. And we can keep on going, you know, for several rows. And if you run out of yarn, then you just pick up where you left off. So and some people get confused by that process. So say I ran out of yarn just here. All I would do is I would just anchor on like we did in the beginning to this one, resume, go backwards and forwards. So it's not a disaster if you do run out of the thread. All right, so there we've got the 2 rows. And to finish off, we always do a little trim, but I always feed this kind of back towards or down the center, because I find that that is the way that causes the least noticeable kind of, it doesn't kind of interrupt the pattern is what I'm trying to say. So I've just gone back through the middle like so, and I'm just going to then pop it behind over the next warp thread, and it'll just kind of disappear into the, you can see it a tiny bit, I could probably push it a bit more. But that is sumac, and I'll be back in a second to show you the sumac using a roving.